The man rode into Gallows Hollow beneath a sky that refused to break. It had held its silence since the funeral, low and gray and hung with that unmoving quiet that follows something violent. He was a tall shape draped in dust and long grief, the sort of man no one greeted first. Even the dogs at the edge of town did not bark. They watched him pass like they knew he had nothing left to lose. His name was Elijah Crane. His hands still wore the mark of his wife's blood, though it had been 3 weeks. She'd bled out slow in their cabin while he held her jaw and prayed too late for a God he no longer believed in. A group of riders had come down from the divide, took what they wanted, burned what they didn't. They left him with her body and a fire that wouldn't die in his chest. Now he was here for a rifle. Not a store piece, not a repeater dulled from overuse. He'd heard of a man in Gallows Hollow who built rifles like sermons, long, precise, and meant to deliver something final. They called him Harlan Pike. Used to work with the government back before the world slipped loose. He'd gone strange since the war, they said, but the guns were clean, accurate. Elijah needed one that would shoot through the lies men told and the bones they wrapped them in. He dismounted outside Pike's place just past noon. The shop was half forge, half graveyard of failed metal, springs and bolts and gunstocks stacked like bones. The front door hung crooked. No sign out front, just a crow nailed upside down over the lintel. Elijah pushed the door and stepped inside. The heat hit him first, dry and bitter with metal, then the quiet. The forge roared somewhere out back, but the shop itself was still. Workbenches cluttered with tools, walls hung with rifles that gleamed even in the low light. He waited, one hand resting on his belt. No one came. Then he heard it. A rustle, faint but wrong, like fabric, like a whisper trying not to be heard. He moved slow, instinct old and honed, and followed the sound around a stack of crates toward the far end of the room. There she was, in a cage. Iron bars set into the floor, heavy, rough-welded. She sat at the back of it, barefoot, hands tucked under her knees. Her dress was torn, blood on the hem, dirt in her hair, no older than 20. Her eyes met his with a kind of quiet that wasn't fear. It was a waiting, a seeing. Elijah didn't speak right away. He looked to the lock, to the bolts sunk deep, to the chair outside the cage, worn in the middle like someone sat there regular. And beside it, a ledger with names crossed out. "Who did this?" he said. She didn't answer, just stared. Then, from the back of the shop, the sound of boots on gravel. Elijah turned. A man emerged, tall and dry-looking, like someone hung too long in the sun. Gray hair, long coat, grease on his hands. "Pike." "She ain't for sale," the man said, voice like ash. Elijah said nothing. His hand stayed on his belt. "She ain't yours either," Pike added, stepping closer. "But the gun you came for, I've got something that'll suit a man like you." Elijah didn't move. "You built that cage," Elijah said. It wasn't a question. "She earned it," Pike said. "Is she a criminal?" "No," the man smiled, faint. "She's something worse." Elijah turned back to her. She hadn't moved. She sat there, watching, like she'd already seen how this ended. "I came for a rifle," Elijah said slowly, "and I'll take it. But I'll be taking her, too." Pike laughed once, just once. "You think you're owed something," Pike said, "but revenge don't buy anything worth keeping. She's not your justice. She's just a girl caught in the fire." "I don't care." Pike stepped forward, close enough Elijah could see the twist in his jaw, the shaking hands that didn't shake when they held a tool. The man had killed before, that was easy to see. But Elijah had buried everything he'd loved, and the difference lay in the eyes. Without warning, Pike drew. Elijah was faster. The shot echoed through the forge, dropped the man mid-step. He didn't scream, just fell forward, face in the soot, mouth open like he had one more thing to say. Elijah stood there a moment, waiting to feel something. He didn't. Then he turned to the girl in the cage. She still hadn't moved. still watched him like she was trying to read him to the root. "You got a name?" he asked. She said nothing, but slowly she stood and smiled, a little, not kind, not grateful, just the beginning of something sharp. The key was on Pike's belt. Elijah stepped over the body and took it, the heat from the forge throwing a shimmer across the walls. The metal of the key bit cold against his palm as he knelt before the cage. The lock turned with a weighty click, like a final decision being made. She stepped out without hesitation. No flinch, no backward glance, just a barefooted walk into the dead man's shop, like it was always meant to be hers. "Name?" he asked again. This time she looked at him fully, not just with her eyes, but with the whole of herself, the way a wolf might look if it knew you weren't here to save it, only to unleash it. Sabine. That was all, no last name. No history offered. He gave a nod and turned to the forge. A long bench stretched along the back wall, tools lined up with obsessive care. On a rack above, half-finished rifles hung like unanswered questions. Elijah reached for the one Pike had been working on, a long-barreled piece with a dark walnut stock and filigree etched into the receiver. Not showy, just careful, like it was made for a single purpose. Sabine moved past him, silent. She went to a shelf near the fire, opened a small drawer, and pulled out a folded scrap of paper. She studied it a moment, then slipped it down the front of her dress. "What was that?" he asked. She looked at him with that same unreadable expression. "A list." Elijah let it rest. He didn't need her truths, not yet. They left the shop in silence, the door swinging shut behind them. The sky still hadn't broken. A storm hung somewhere behind the hills but refused to come. The town was quiet, though they'd heard the gunshot. No one in Gallows Hollow asked questions. They were the kind to know when to stay behind their curtains. His horse stood where he left it. She paused beside it, studying the animal like it was another thing she hadn't chosen but would ride anyway. "There's only one saddle," he said. "I'll manage." They rode out east, where the road split toward the Iron Range. Elijah didn't ask where she meant to go. He rode like a man with nowhere left, and she rode like a woman who'd already made up her mind to burn whatever she found. That night they made camp in the gully of a dried-up creek bed. He lit a small fire from thornwood, the smoke rising sharp and thin into the dusk. She sat cross-legged across from him, hair braided back now, arms scratched but calm. She had that way about her, still like a grave but not dead, just waiting. "You killed him before," she said after a long silence. "Not your first." "No," he said. She nodded. "Mine neither." Elijah looked at her closely. There were scars on her arms, healed the wrong way, not all from Pike. "How long were you in that cage?" 2 months, she said. "Maybe 3, hard to tell. He gave me water regular. Food sometimes." "Why?" "Because he wanted to fix me," she said, her voice low. "Said I had rot in my soul, said he'd cut it out piece by piece if he had to." She said it without bitterness, just flat. Like she'd already turned the pain into something harder. "Why he keep you alive?" She leaned forward, held his eyes. "Because I didn't scream." The fire cracked. Somewhere beyond the dark, a coyote cried once and stopped. She stood and walked to her pack, what little Pike had let her keep. From it she pulled a strip of cloth, unwrapped something from the center, a medallion, small, brass, engraved with a symbol he didn't know. She turned it over in her hands. "You said it was a list," he said. "That paper." She nodded. Pike was on it. He was number 4. Elijah leaned back against a stone. The ground beneath him was hard, but he welcomed the ache. It reminded him he still had a body, still had a purpose. "And what are you planning?" he asked. Sabine looked at him again, the firelight catching the edge of something ancient in her eyes. "I'm going to finish it." He nodded. "Then I'll help you." She raised an eyebrow. Why? Because I need a reason to wake up tomorrow, he said, and I think you're it. She didn't smile, but something softened. Not mercy, not yet, just the slow turning of a hinge long rusted. She laid down beside the fire, back to the world. Elijah kept watch. The wind shifted. The next name waited. They crossed the edge of Iron Range at dawn, where the air smelled of old rust and the trees grew in crooked thickets. The hills rose like broken knuckles, steep and hard to climb without bleeding. No roads ran clean here, just wagon scars and forgotten trapper trails. Sabine led now. Her feet knew the path even if her voice gave nothing. She moved like someone who didn't believe in safety, only in speed and silence. Elijah followed close, rifle slung across his back, eyes tracking the terrain for signs of movement. By midday, they reached a small settlement marked only by 2 rotted fence posts and a toppled chimney. Once it had been a mining camp. Now it was nothing but ruins and echoes. Sabine stopped near the largest foundation and crouched, brushing aside dirt with her hand. She uncovered the remains of a stone circle, fire-blackened and still holding a shape. This was theirs, she said. Elijah crouched beside her. Who? The ones before Pike, the man who first put me on that list. She stood, eyes scanning the tree line. They'd bring girls here, she said. No names, just numbers. I was 13. Elijah felt something inside his chest shift, old rage finding new breath. They were soldiers once, Sabine went on, from the War of Divisions. Afterward, they vanished into the hills, called themselves the 10, no law, no uniforms, just a code they made up for themselves. How many left? She looked at him. 6. If Pike was 4, that means we go south next, to the Salt Flats. Elijah nodded. They didn't camp that night. They rode through the dark, Sabine asleep against his back for brief moments before the jolts of the horse woke her again. He kept one hand near the rifle the whole time. The stars above were sharp and clear, offering no comfort. By the second day they reached the flats. White earth stretched wide, cracked and silent. Nothing grew here, nothing cried. Just heat and the hum of wind. Sabine pointed to a ridge in the distance. He camps up there, name's Darrell Nix, used to be a scout, likes to set traps. He'll know we're coming. Then we don't come from the front. They circled wide, staying low. It took most of the day, crawling through broken scrub and ancient stone beds. At dusk, they reached the backside of the ridge. Smoke curled thin from a fire pit near a rock overhang. One tent, one mule tied nearby. No sentry. No extra prints, Elijah whispered. Could be he's alone. Sabine shook her head. He never is. She crept forward, knife in hand. Elijah flanked left. They moved with the quiet of those who have been hunted before. Darrell Nix stepped out of the tent before they got within 20 feet. Gray beard, lean frame, shotgun already leveled. Evenin', Sabine, he said. She froze. I knew you'd come, he said. Pike sent word before you put him down. Told me he was keeping something dangerous. Guess I ought to thank him. Elijah stepped from cover. Drop it. Nix didn't flinch. And you must be the grieving husband. Heard about you, too. Folks say you're carrying death in your eyes. Looks about right. He didn't lower the gun. Elijah didn't either. I didn't touch her, Nix said. Not like the others. I watched. That was my job. You think that saves you? Sabine asked. No, he said. But it makes me different. Sabine raised her knife. No, it makes you a coward. The gun fired, but not his. Elijah's shot tore through Nix's shoulder, spinning him sideways. He screamed, dropped the shotgun, and crawled backward toward the tent. Sabine was already on him. She pinned his hand with her boot, pressed the knife to his throat. He started to beg. She didn't listen. Elijah turned away, watching the horizon while the screams carried. When it was quiet again, she stood with blood on her hands and no expression. Not relief, not triumph, just the weight of another name crossed out. They burned the camp before they left. No grave, no marker. That night they slept in shifts. Sabine didn't ask him to hold her. He didn't offer. But something passed between them anyway, wordless, raw, unspoken. The list was now 5. And every mile made the silence between them heavier. The next morning broke slow and gray, the kind of sky that forgets how to rain. They moved south by riverbed, where the reeds grew high and the mud swallowed prints. Elijah rode with one hand on the reins, the other resting near his rifle. Sabine walked beside the horse, silent, the dried blood still caked beneath her nails. They didn't speak of Nix. By mid-morning they came upon a trader's wagon sunk deep in a ditch, its wheels shattered and canvas torn. Flies thickened the air, drawn to the thing under the tarp. Sabine didn't hesitate. She climbed into the wagon, pulled the canvas back. The girl was no more than 15, throat cut, hands bound. Whoever killed her hadn't bothered to close her eyes. Her dress was turned inside out. Sabine stared at the body a long while, then climbed down. "Someone's ahead of us," Elijah said. She nodded, one of the 10, Cain and Roch. Elijah didn't ask how she knew. The name was acid on her tongue, and that was enough. They buried the girl beside the river with no stone, just a circle of pine cones. Sabine sat beside the grave for a while, plucking petals from a weed and dropping them one by one into the earth. Canaan liked girls who didn't scream, she said. Said it ruined the melody. He had a thing for music. Played banjo like it was holy. "Where do we find him?" She looked up, next county, in a place called Mercy's Nest. That name sounded like a lie, but they rode anyway. It took 2 days. On the second night, thunder cracked far off, and the scent of blood hung in the wind. Sabine began to hum a low tune as they rode, something minor and slow. Elijah didn't ask where she learned it. Mercy's Nest wasn't a town. It was a boarding house turned brothel, run by a woman named Clove who'd lost 3 fingers to a carving knife and smiled like it never healed right. The house sat in the valley between 2 burned-out farms, red lanterns strung across the porch like garlands. There were men on the roof with rifles. Elijah counted 3. Sabine walked up the steps alone. Inside, the house smelled of sweat and sour perfume. The women glanced up at her, then away. They knew what she was before she opened her mouth. One of them whispered something behind her palm. Clove stood behind the bar, eyes sharp. "You Sabine." "I am." "Then you're late. He's been expecting you." "Who?" Clove tilted her head toward the back room. "Canaan." Elijah stepped inside then, rifle in hand. No one tried to stop him. The room fell still. Sabine walked to the door, didn't knock. Canaan Roch sat in a chair beside the hearth, banjo resting against his knee. His hair was white and fine, his face a net of lines. He looked up and smiled. "Well," he said, "hell did open its door." Sabine stepped into the room. "You killed that girl by the river." "I kill lots of girls," he said. "But that one screamed too much. Thought I'd spare her the rest." She moved quick, but not quicker than his hand. The knife he pulled was curved, carved from bone. He slashed toward her throat. Elijah shot him through the arm. The knife clattered. Sabine didn't stop. She struck him once hard, then again. Her fists were tight as stones. She didn't draw her blade, just used her hands over and over until his mouth bled foam and his eyes rolled back. When it was done, she turned to Elijah. Her knuckles were split. He was number 6. The women in the house didn't cheer. They didn't thank her. They just watched her pass like they'd seen something old crawl out of a forgotten place. They rode out under cover of dark. No one followed. The road ahead stretched into the hollow lands, wide, broken country where ghosts traveled without feet. Sabine spoke once as they camped. I dreamed of him for 7 years, every night. Now I don't know what to do with the silence." Elijah didn't answer, just stoked the fire until it crackled steady. The list was 4 now, and she hadn't smiled since. The hollow lands swallowed them. No markers, no trails, just dry grass whispering in wind and scattered bones long sun-bleached. Their horses moved uneasy, hooves slipping in loose shale, heads jerking at shadows that didn't move. Sabine said little. She'd grown thinner, hungrier around the eyes, not weak, just more stripped down, like grief had boiled off everything soft. They slept beneath dead trees, cooked little, ate less. Elijah took to carving marks into his rifle stock each night. Not names, not dates, just lines, thin, precise, counting something only he knew how to read. On the 4th day, they saw smoke to the west, not campfire. Not signal, thick and black, curling into the sky with a smell that caught in the teeth. They reached it by dusk. It had been a chapel, just stone and wood, old and squat, half-burned now, bodies inside, 6, maybe 7. All hung from the rafters, heads wrapped in cloth, hands nailed to the pews, symbols carved into their chests. One word written in ash across the altar: witness. Sabine stepped inside first. She didn't cover her mouth, just stared. Elijah followed, gun drawn. From the shadows behind the pulpit, a voice spoke. "I remember you," it said. A man stepped into the half-light, broad shoulders, white hair twisted into a rope, scars across both cheeks like tribal brands. No weapon in hand, just a calm that didn't belong here. "Lucian Hale," Sabine said. He smiled, slow and wide. "I thought you'd never come." Elijah raised the rifle. Lucian didn't flinch. "Shoot me if you like, but it won't fix what I did." "Won't fix her." Sabine moved forward. "Where's the others?" she asked. "Dead or worse. Time scattered us. You're chasing ghosts." "You're one of them." "I was," he said. "Now I bury them." Elijah stepped beside Sabine. "You do this?" he asked, motioning to the bodies. Lucian nodded once. "Why?" "Because I remember," he said, looking straight at Sabine. "I remember what we did to you, and the others. I've been trying to balance the scale ever since." Sabine stared. Something warred in her, disgust, confusion, the dull ache of a vengeance disrupted. "You think this makes it right?" "No," he said, "but I couldn't live without trying." He stepped closer, slowly, hands open. "I can take you to the next one," he said. "Thatcher Vale lives alone in the basalt country. You won't find him without me." Elijah watched Sabine. Her eyes never left Lucian's. Finally, she nodded. They left the church behind them, still smoldering. No prayers said, no names spoken. That night, Lucian didn't sleep. He sat watch by the fire with his hands clasped like a man praying to something that never answers. In the morning, they moved again. Sabine rode ahead. Lucian walked beside Elijah. "She doesn't trust you," Elijah said. "She shouldn't," Lucian replied. "Neither should you." "What changed?" Lucian looked ahead at the girl he helped destroy, now woman-shaped and iron-edged. "She didn't scream," he said. "Even at the end, that broke something in me." Elijah didn't answer. He didn't forgive. But he understood what a broken man looked like. They traveled through basalt fields for 3 days. Rocks sharp as razors, wind howling like old wounds. Lucian led without hesitation. On the 4th morning, they came upon a cabin built into a cliffside. No path led to it, just a narrow ledge and a rope ladder. "He's in there," Lucian said, "but he'll hear you coming." Sabine turned to Elijah. "I want him alive." "I'll do what I can." She climbed first. Elijah followed, rifle slung across his chest. Lucian stayed below, watching the sky. Inside, the cabin was dark, heavy air. Shelves lined with bones and jars filled with cloudy things. Thatcher Vale sat in the center, rocking in a chair, long rifle across his knees. He looked up as they entered. "Took you long enough," he said. Sabine didn't speak. Vale laughed. "You were my favorite, strong lungs, pretty scars." Elijah moved first. Vale fired, missed. The bullet hit the wall behind Sabine. She tackled him, blade out, cutting low along his thigh. He screamed, went down. Elijah kicked the rifle away. "Say her name," he said. Vale spat. "I don't remember." Sabine stepped forward, then she made him remember. It took a long time. When it was done, she didn't look away, just breathed hard and slow. Then stood and wiped her hands clean. Lucian climbed up after, silent. "You got what you came for," he said. "No," Sabine said, "not yet." Only two names remained, and both were still breathing. They came down from the cliff like revenants. Blood stiffened on Sabine's sleeves, her face unreadable beneath it. Elijah said nothing. Lucian kept his distance. The rope ladder burned behind them, eaten slow by the fire Elijah set before they rode out. Let no one return to that place. Let it vanish into ash and heat and bad memory. They moved northeast now, into colder country. The hills rose again, steeper than before, and the sky kept close like it wanted to press them flat. Snow flurried by noon and stuck by night. Lucian gave them shelter, a hunter's hut built into a pine hollow, musty but sound. Inside, he stoked the stove and sat with his back to the wall, gun across his knees, a man waiting for judgment. Sabine didn't sleep that night. Elijah heard her pacing, soft, steady, like her thoughts needed movement to stay caged. He rose once, offered her water. She didn't take it. "He's next," she said, voice low. "Number 9. His name's Myron Vetch." "I remember," Elijah said. "He wasn't like the others," she went on. "He wasn't cruel, he was worse. He was kind, he called it mercy. Said what they did was better than what life would have offered." She looked at the stove. The flames lit her cheek in flickers. "He held my hand after," she said, "told me I was clean now." Elijah watched her closely. "Where?" She turned her head, slow and certain. "North of the widow's spine. He keeps a hospital there." Elijah felt something twist. A hospital. She nodded. "For girls." They left before dawn. Lucian stayed behind, said he'd had enough of ghosts, said he was done dragging guilt by the reins. Sabine didn't argue. It took 4 days to reach the widow's spine, a jagged ridge where wind screamed like something hurt. The path down was slick with meltwater, narrow enough that one misstep meant falling 100 feet into stone. They tied the horses and walked. The hospital wasn't a building. It was a ruin. Walls half collapsed, windows patched with oilcloth, a wooden sign that read Providence Haven. Inside, girls moved like ghosts, silent, bruised, barely older than Sabine had been when it started. Elijah counted 16. Sabine walked through the main hall without stopping. A nurse reached for her arm. She shook her off. At the back of the ruin, behind a velvet curtain, they found him. Myron Vetch sat at a desk made of crates, books stacked in columns beside him. He wore spectacles. His beard was trimmed. A silver cross hung from his neck. He looked up, and for a moment his face changed. "Sabine," he said, gentle. She didn't answer. "You lived," he whispered. "I prayed for that." She drew her blade. "I made this place," he said. "For them, for others. To make amends." "You made this place," she said coldly, "so you could watch them suffer longer." His expression didn't falter. "I saved you." Elijah moved behind her. "Say it," he told Vetch. The man's voice trembled. "I say what you did." "I treated her," he said. "I offered comfort." Sabine struck, one cut, precise, deep. Vetch fell sideways, gurgling. She leaned down, whispered something Elijah couldn't hear. Then she turned and left. They burned the hospital after removing the girls, gave them horses, gave them names. One by one they rode away, heading south, east, anywhere that wasn't here. One of them kissed Sabine's hand before leaving. Another handed her a drawing. A girl with dark hair and a fire behind her. By dusk, only Elijah and Sabine remained. She looked at the smoke. He wasn't the worst. No, Elijah said, that leaves one. She nodded, the first. The one who started it. Elijah asked, do you know where he is? She turned to him, I always have. They rode west, through burned orchards and abandoned farms, through wind-scoured plains where nothing lived but crows. The land grew flatter, older, littered with the bones of towns that didn't survive the last collapse. Sabine never looked back. Elijah kept pace, rifle strapped across his back, eyes always forward. The final name wasn't spoken aloud. She'd never given it to him, but he saw the shift in her as they neared the edge of the desert. Saw her hands tremble once when she thought he wasn't watching. Saw her lips move in prayer, though he knew she believed in nothing now. They crossed into Dead Wash at dusk, a basin of dry salt and forgotten mines, where air cracked the lips and wind carried sand like razors. A house stood at the far end, long, low, metal-roofed, surrounded by fencing too new for the land. It wasn't a fortress, it didn't need to be. The man inside had never feared retribution, not once in 20 years. Sabine dismounted. Elijah followed. No second thoughts, he said. She shook her head. There never were. They approached on foot. The house was quiet. No guards, no dogs, just a lantern burning in the window. She knocked. A long pause. Then the door opened. He looked ordinary, not monstrous, not broken, just a man, late 50s. Gray hair neat, shirt clean. A ring still on his finger. His eyes were the only thing that held the truth, flat, unreadable, the kind that had watched pain and decided it was useful. He blinked. Sabine. She didn't speak. He stepped aside. Come in. She entered. Elijah followed. The inside was cleaner than it should have been. Books lined the walls, maps on the table, a glass of bourbon untouched beside a journal. Been years, the man said. You look good. Sabine stood in the center of the room, hands at her sides. You don't, she said. He smiled. You remember my name. Yes, she said. Malcolm Klein. He nodded. So, what happens now? You die. I figured. She didn't draw, not yet. You started it, she said. You built the list, you picked the girls. Trained the others, you called it a brotherhood, but it was just rot. I wanted to protect something, he said. The world's cruel, we tried to make it clean, controlled, beautiful even. You called what you did beautiful, she asked. Art always offends, he said. That's when she moved, not with rage, with precision. The knife went in beneath his ribs, twisted. He dropped, coughing blood, face slack with surprise. I thought you'd scream, he said. She crouched beside him. I did. You just didn't listen. He died on the floor of his clean house, under a painting of a mountain no one remembered. They burned it all. The journals, the maps, the books, left no mark that he'd ever lived. At sunrise, they sat on the ridge above Dead Wash, watching the fire eat his legacy. Elijah finally asked, what now? Sabine stared at the flames. I don't know, she said. There's no more names. Does it feel done? She didn't answer. He took her hand, not for comfort, just to remind them both they were still flesh. Later, when the fire died and the wind picked up again, they mounted and rode east, not toward anything, just away. The list was ash. But they were still breathing.